You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra. After Elon Musk, yet another titan in the business world has praised Prime Minister Modi. This time it is Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, who has hailed Prime Minister Modi's efforts to uplift India over the last decade. Speaking at an event hosted by the Economic Club of New York, Mr. Dimon commended the reforms implemented by Prime Minister Modi and his government, particularly with regards to poverty alleviation. He has also highlighted India's advancements in technology and finance, especially the widespread adoption of digital identification and banking services. Well, the CEO of JP Morgan has also lauded the Prime Minister for his resilience in challenging outdated bureaucratic systems. While doing so, he has also called out Western media over their diatribes against the Indian Prime Minister. Amidst all of this, and this praise, we are going to ask the big question whether Sabka Vishwas is going global. We'll talk about this with our guests. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former diplomat, is with me on this broadcast. Mithali Nikore, economist, also joins us on the show. Mr. Savio Rodriguez, BJP leader, is with us on this program as well. Last but by no means the least, Mr. Pathik Pine, international affairs expert, is also joining us on the show. Ambassador Mukherjee, it's a delighter to see that amidst all, the admonishment and the rebuke that the Western media considers to be its staple consumption of India's environment, here comes a gentleman who wants to in fact appreciate the Prime Minister for the praise that, he rightfully deserves. Here is somebody who's looking at the glass half full and not half empty. And that's exactly what we can accuse the Western media of. Ma'am, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm saying very well said. And in fact, JP Morgan, this is very high praise coming from him, because he's also added that the Americans should look at the state of their own economy. He has, in fact, also lauded the manner in which Prime Minister Modi has been able to challenge the bureaucracy, get reforms through despite the difficulties of getting reforms through in a democracy, problems that China doesn't face, for example, etc. And his narrative comes at a crucial time because, as you rightly said, there is an effort by certain vested interests outside India to combine with vested interests inside India to build a false and negative narrative about our Prime Minister and the achievements of his government. We saw a chink in the armor in last week's Economist, which was extremely critical about Rahul Gandhi and reluctantly complimentary, very reluctantly complimentary, I have to say, about Prime Minister Modi, but acknowledging, finally, some of his achievements. That followed by JP Morgan, I would say definitely is a second chink in the Western armor, and we will see more of it coming, because there is no doubt that a rising India under Prime Minister Modi is actually to the strategic and economic advantage of the West, rather than a weak coalition government that would push India back for decades. This is something that the West knows at a time when the world order is in flux, or when Western economies are facing challenges. They are facing difficult elections where extreme right can make a comeback as heads of state, in which case, for instance, would a Marie Le Pen send French troops to Ukraine? I very much doubt it. To Odessa? I very much doubt it. Our President Trump, as US President again, would he continue the Ukraine-Russia conflict? I don't think so. So when such important changes are happening, this is the right time for Prime Minister Modi and his government to stay at the helm of affairs and to guide India through what is going to be a turbulent time in international relations. And if the West is finally understanding that, well, it's taken them a long time to understand, but we've dealt with Goras for 200 years, better late than never. I'm glad that finally they are understanding the writing on the wall beneath.
Absolutely. Savio, on one hand, you also have people like George Soros, who continue to, concoct and rake up issues which predominantly have been debunked by India at a number of levels. JP Morgan is a very serious company. It literally is responsible for the trading and the stock ecosystem that we see today. It's a company which is well trusted. It's one of the big league companies, and the CEO talking about the Prime Minister in this stead not only takes our equity up, but this also goes on to prove a point that we here on NewsX, along with you and some of our other panelists, have always been saying that India is on the ascent.
Vineet, to answer your question and your point of view, let me put it in three segments. The first is George Soros. George Soros is an economic terrorist. It is something that I've been saying time and again. And George Soros's interest is to ensure that India, that is rising, does not rise, because he currently does not benefit from India rising. So he's going to work and do everything possible to ensure that India does not rise, for which he will work with opposition leaders, work with startup companies, work with NGOs that do not allow for the India rising narrative to build, and that confidence level to build with the people of India. The second point is what the JP Morgan gentleman is saying, and I'm grateful that he sees India and Prime Minister Modi's efforts in that direction, and rightfully so. So if I had to put what he mentions primarily on digital India in one line, then I would say India is currently jamming, Vineet. What do I mean by that? You've got the Jandan, you have the Aadhaar, and you have the mobile. It is JAM. This is how it is synergized so beautifully. And let me give you some data, right? So mobile phone subscribers for the year 2014 were 905 million. Right now, it is 1,144 million. That's a 26.4% increase. Broadband subscribers was only 69.9 million. Now it is 852.4 million. That's a 1,119.5% increase. Now with all you having mobile, you having the Aadhaar being linked to through the mobile, and you're getting your direct benefits transfers that are happening. Look at what has happened. Your digital your digital transfers, your annual direct benefit transfers have gone up by 10,304%. That is what Digital India is all about. Digital India was not about just mobile phones and people to be able to get onto TikTok and post their messages and social media. It was much more than that. You, as a citizen, are in the power to give consent to a third party to utilize your information for transactivity. That is the whole beauty of what Digital India is all about. So it's not about just going in and feeding information. It's about giving you the ability to consent. And that is why today, when you see shopkeepers, the other day I went to a vada pav counter, a real small vada pav counter in Goa. And I took out cash to pay him. And he said, sir, I have got GPay. I can give you numerous examples like that. That digital economy is transforming India, and people have got mobiles, they've got smartphones, and it's all integrated together. Today, you are able to transact on ground, travel without cash, make your transactions via your phone. Your entire communication, your entire financial transactions are on your mobile. Your digital system, look at the Digi Locker, for example. I remember when we were going to update our passports, one of the prerequisites for my kids who were moving from being minors to adults was that they needed their 12th standard certificates. And that was something that was not told to us. So what did we do? We had Digi Locker on their phones. And we put in the data of their certificates, the admission number that they had. And that's when we got the certificates, the verified certificates then and there. It saved me the trouble of coming back to the passport office. So digital India transformation is at a grassroots level. I can give you numbers that will make your hair stand, but it's when it impacts you personally. And it has impacted us as a family, it is impacting families everywhere. I do not carry cash in my wallet anymore. Maximum you will find is about 500 rupees in my wallet.
Right.
Just to test whether digital India works. And you know one place where digital India does not work. It is something that I've raised with the government as well, at the India Post Office.
Absolutely.
That is the only organization that does not have GPay or a UPI transaction. And it is something that I've raised with the government. So digital transformation, digital India is one of the most beautiful and enterprising initiatives taken by the government to make the people of India digitally sound and free and to be able to give consent to a transaction.
Absolutely. Pathakrit, your thoughts on this high praise, and of course this goes without saying that everyone is watching India. Every move we make, in fact even the negatives that come out are usually put under the microscope and evaluated. And amidst this partiality that we have seen on behalf of the Western media, it's really heartening to see that compliments from such avenues are also getting viral on social media.
Vinit, first of all, India today has two choices. Either we aspire to become a $10 trillion economy, as Prime Minister Modi has worked towards, or we become a Venezuela or a Zimbabwe if we follow the wealth redistribution model, which has made Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, and even Soviet Union collapse. So that's the choice we have. Now, if you look at what the Prime Minister has done in the last 10 years, it is a multi-spectrum of development that I think has been celebrated and appreciated, amidst all the negative, deliberate, lopsided, and motivated criticism that most of these Western media generally tend to give. So let me tell you what the Prime Minister has done. I mean, you would never find, or you would rarely find a leader who has, within a span of 10 years, have brought out 25 crore people out of multidimensional poverty. At the same time, have worked towards structural economic reforms like Insolvency, Bankruptcy Code Act or GST, which takes time to get implemented and initially have hiccups. But he took that decision to, go through those challenges and then ensure that they get successfully implemented. At the same time, work towards building of infrastructure so that India's growth story doesn't become merely a bubble. So, under PM Gati Shakti, 100 lakh crore is being invested, and that is visible across the country to increase India's ability to absorb investments. At the same time, he has worked towards development of supply chains. If you look at what the government has done from the period of COVID to create production-linked incentives for creating industrial manufacturing base in India so that in future we do not face the kind of supply chain shocks that we faced during the COVID period. At the same time, please understand, Vinit, if all of this was done by the Prime Minister without raising taxes and instead reducing corporate tax at par with global levels so that India becomes a preferred destination for manufacturing, as all along while enhancing FDI limits and pushing towards Atmanirbhar so that we do not remain an import-driven economy, even while enhancing India's export potential to the level of $776 billion for the financial year ended 2023-24, and even while working towards sustainable development, ensuring that our cultural ethos, civilizational legacy is embedded with technological development and economic growth so that a balance is maintained. And all of this, Vinit, was done to create an economy which is now the fifth largest. Officially, it's almost on the verge of crossing the $4 trillion mark through a very difficult phase of pandemic which had no reference point. and India emerged as the fifth largest economy while giving free vaccine and additional free rations to 80 crore people, something which the Western developed countries could not give, even while getting prepared for a war which we could face anytime. In the last 4 years, so many situations were there. We were on the verge of war. We did everything possible, even while giving vaccines to 99 odd countries, going out as a first respondents whenever there's an issue anywhere in the world, be it in Turkey or the number of times in the recent past, Indian Navy warships have helped, these ships in the sea routes, which are either getting hijacked or getting, pounded by somebody. So many things have been done by the Prime Minister. If you look at it, in 2013, Morgan Stanley defined India as one of the fragile 5 economies of the world. Today, in less than 10 years from the time of fragile 5, India became among the major 5 economies of the world. And that is something astounding. Even while at times beneath defying the Western sanctions that were there on Russia, even while becoming the voice of the global South and asking for multilateral reforms in institutions so that it becomes far more inclusive and talk about the rights and aspirations of all countries and not just a select few. So maintaining that fine balance in terms of being independent, in terms of having a foreign policy, even while maintaining good relation to the major power houses of the West was not easy. But that fine balancing and fine work has been done by the Prime Minister, even while knowing that all that he is doing to create Atmanirbharta and bringing out people out of poverty or creating an ecosystem for startups and micro enterprises to flourish in India will create too many vested interests very unhappy, and those vested interests have packaged data in a manner to project in a very extrapolate data in a manner to project India in a negative way. He has, like the Samudra Manthan, taken all the wish like Shivji and delivered the Amrit for the country. It's not easy. And of course, it doesn't mean that we don't have problems. But as a country, we have learned to deal with problems and evolve. And today, India is a country which is showing the path to the developing countries in the rest of the world, that you can take my template of Jan Dhan Aadhar mobile, you can take my template of Digital India for your development also, which need not be only for a few, but for all. For every Startup India campaign, which helped 1.25 lakh entrepreneurs get a toehold today, beneath 8 crore entrepreneurs were created by Mudra Yojana. So it is across the spectrum that development is happening for 140 crore people, which is not an easy task in a democracy like India. And that is why I think this appreciation is good enough, but it should have been far more and all comprehensive from the West, which I think is lacking. They need to be a little more large-hearted and appreciative of what Modi ji has done. Back to you, Vinay.
Right. And Mitali, let us also, not forget the fact that there is an elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that the scale at which India operates, the population at which India operates, and the kind of odds that we have to deal in terms of administration on a daily basis, and still getting these numbers and still getting these technologies to penetrate tier 2, tier 3 cities, and putting smartphones in the hands of almost every citizen in the country, is a monumental achievement. And it should not be a big deal if it's being appreciated.
Absolutely, Vineet. And, I think it's also great to get this from the JP Morgan, side, because India has just joined JP Morgan's Emerging Economies Index. And this is actually a huge achievement, and I would like to specify why. See, what happens today is that India has been reliant on a number of multilateral organizations, bilateral donors, for many decades, as any emerging economy has been, for, a certain amount of patient capital, as we call it, especially in the case of infrastructure and, capital development. In the last 10 to 15 years, especially in the last 10 years, we have seen that reliance on this kind of concessional financing is not only reducing, but India is becoming a safe haven for foreign direct investment. And now, recognizing the stability of India's monetary policy, recognizing the stability of India's fiscal policies and fiscal prudence, and very, very fantastic management of the fiscal policy during COVID, particularly, is what led to JP Morgan then including India in its emerging markets portfolio. And that is huge because then India is able to access not only concessional financing but market based equity financing for investment in our startups, for investments in our infrastructure projects, for investments in manufacturing sector. And this does not require any incentives. This money is coming because they know that investing in India is going to lead to higher returns than investing in any other economy at this point in time in the world. And this is why he is praising the management that is coming from Mr. Modi. I also want to point out one very, very important statistic that Dr. Shamika Ravi has tweeted today. And I was working with her on other aspects, and this one particular analysis she has tweeted today on inequality in India. She points out that inequality in India was at its highest point in 2004. And through the years of the UPA, in the last 10 years till 2016, inequality actually kept on increasing. And this is using data from Thomas Piketty's analysis that she has done this analysis. And then she found that from 2017-18 onwards, the share of the bottom 50% of the population in the country's GDP has only increased and has been on an increasing trajectory since then, except a blip during the COVID years. Now, think about what this means, right? Because we have been talking about the fact that there's a K-shaped recovery post-COVID, that there's increasing, inequality, and yes, we see traces of that in certain sectors. But by and large, through this data, we have been able to now demonstrate that inequality is actually falling. And in the last 10 years, inequality has been reducing, which means that, as Savio sir was saying, previously, you are taking the benefits of growth to the last mile and to the last point. I also want to narrate one experience. In the last 3 months, I visited around 15 cities for different projects alongside, I'm working with government projects, private sector projects. And in every single visit that I have done, mostly there are many of them in East India, but also in the South, West, and some of the North cities as well. All tier three, tier two cities. The penetration of digitization, of course, is very high. But another thing which is changing, which is really changing, is the kind of businesses that people are doing. There's a movement away from the traditional MSME. The traditional MSMEs are innovating. They are bringing in digitization into their business models. They are bringing in more and more technology adoption into their manufacturing operations. They are benefiting from the PM Gati Shakti scheme the most. Whenever I visit multimodal logistics parks or industrial parks, I'm noticing that they are saying, what? The most important thing that has happened in the last 10 years is that the logistics cost of transporting commodities from point A to point B has been cut down for us and majorly cut down for us. See, this is an economic driver. This is a transformational economic driver because when you have growth in logistics and when you have a country with seamless logistics, only then can you actually have a country where goods are flowing, manufacturing is flowing, jobs are being created. And the priority that the prime minister has placed personally on the logistics sector and on the Gati Shakti scheme has been transformational. Finally, I'd like to come to the most important aspect that I always talk about, which is gender equality. The Prime Minister has always emphasized Nari Shakti and women-led development. And in fact, during the presidency of the G20, India came out front and center and said, we are going to tackle those schemes and those issues around gender equality which nobody has looked at. And the most important of them being the care economy. We have been advising the Ministry of Women and Child Development, and Honorable Minister Smriti Irani ma'am has been leading from the front when it comes to talking about investments and making a business case around the care economy and saying that here we need to invest in a whole new sector, create childcare facilities, create elderly care facilities, create a whole workforce so that India can
All right.
become
We have a
the
paucity
care
of time. I want to get closing comments from everyone, starting with Ambassador Mukherjee.
Can you hear me now, Vineet?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Well, I completely agree with what Mitali has just said, and I think what she said, in fact, resonates with the whole economic success story of Prime Minister Modi, and to ensure finally that profit percolates to the lowest layers so that it is truly Vikas that he wants, development for all, but particularly at the lowest level. This contrasts greatly with some of the pronouncements which have caused wide panic among especially the corporates and the business community about the proposal for equitable distribution of wealth of the wealthy, taking away their property and giving it to the poor and impoverished, etc. All that actually would result, first of all, in a run on the banks. It would result in rich corporates leaving India. It would stop FDI flows into India. It would give the impression that India is not a good place for business and investment. In fact, it would cause a complete reversal of the India success story. So, in other words, we are in a phase where we have taken off. And if we have taken off, then the flight should not be aborted. And what JP Morgan has said, finally has acknowledged, is that the India growth story is an inspiring one and one that other emerging economies would do good to follow, and has advised that the United States focus on its own economic problems, which are substantial. In fact, I would say that the West is really in no position to give us lectures on anything because they are in really bad shape economically and politically. Vineet.
All right. Savio, 30 seconds.
Well, let me give you an example of an industry that the West might not be so aware of, but a lot of them are getting awakened to the possibility. So we have a lot of gaushalas in India. So what I have been doing is working with an association that has about 19,800 gaushalas, and we have sort of mentoring a startup to use the gobar that is there at these gaushalas. So now each cow makes about 5 kilos gobar every day, and about 85% of the gobar in India gets wasted and only 15% gets utilized. We even map the potential of that industry. That's about $300 billion US. You know, people in the Gulf, about 8-9 months ago, 192 metric tons was the order, and everybody was scrambling to get that met. You have Maldives, which is the largest importer. You have the Middle East that's importing cow dung. You have a whole lot of countries looking at natural farming, and therefore they're looking at the need for cow dung. Something as simple as that. And today, what you find lying on the roads in most states is going to turn and has the potential of turning to be one of the largest economic drivers in, say, the MSME sector for India. And that is the potential of what Modi's transformational policies are doing.
Okay.
From using cow dung cakes for energy purposes, for using diyas, again, for decorative purposes. There's a huge market, and I'm just giving you a tip of the iceberg.
All right. Pathikrit, 30 seconds, please.
So, Prime Minister Modi's work in the last 10 years can be defined in terms of 3 S: scale, speed, and spread. And that is how you can define it. So, Prime Minister has taken care of 25 crore people, bringing them out of multidimensional poverty, and at the same time respecting the wealth creators. Because if you do not respect wealth creators, if you do not create innovators, if you do not create job providers, then you will not have employment unless you create employers. Fundamentally, if you denigrate wealth creators, as some in India are doing, and then you talk about wealth redistribution, then you end up not distributing wealth, but you end up distributing poverty. That has created, dud economies like Venezuela. So choices are for people to decide what model they want to take. Prime Minister Modi is working towards not just a $10 trillion economy, but a sustainable model which believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and peace for all. Back to you.
All right. Mitali, quickly, please.
So I think just to conclude, Vineet, we're on a very, very fast growth path. And today, nobody can stop us. None of the countries can stop us. And I think we should just take all the praise, but not worry about it because we don't need it. We have to just focus on our growth.
All right. Thank you for that, and appreciate everyone who joined us and weighed in on this high praise, which has, of course, been well deserved. We take a short break. Be right back.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.